Hello, my name is Morne McCartney and I'm doing Excel for Accountants and today we're looking at doing account aging in an Excel spreadsheet. So I'm going to show you a formula that I use. It is quite a complex formula, so I'm going to do it in little components and I'm going to show you three different methods of doing it, because there's a method where you do all of your calculations in Excel using an Excel formula. And then there's two ways that I'm going to show you where you can use a little bit of VBA, and it just makes it much easier. And also, when you refer to the formula then afterwards, your formula is so much shorter. So I'm going to show you all three of those methods, one after the other. And then hopefully this will work for you to also do your account aging in Excel spreadsheet. It's generally, an accountant will have an accounting package that can do this. But sometimes there's anomalies where you are forced to do your aging in Excel, and it is not always so straightforward. And I've seen a lot of accountants actually creating columns and then typing it in manually, which doesn't. You've got this great system, Excel, that can help you to do things. So doing a lot of manual work doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'm going to jump right in and I'm going to show you how these three methods work. So to start off with, we basically, with account aging, you probably have something like a ledger. So let's populate a ledger in. I'm going to stick it here in column H. So let's say this is our example ledger, and we have some entries, we've got some suppliers, and we want to be able to age this and get a proper account aging. So for our aging, we're probably going to look at something that looks something like this. So let's stick an aging down there, and I'm just going to press my formats. So we want something like this, and you'll see that there's figures in here at the moment, so obviously that we will work on, and we're going to want to see it by all suppliers, and we would want to see it maybe by a specific supplier. So a good way to get started is, we obviously want to make sure that there's always, the supplier list is always available to maybe in a drop-down box kind of format. So for that purpose, we are going to create a list of suppliers. I'm going to just name my sheet that as well. And in this case, we have an AA and an AB. So we're going to add that to our supplier list. And we now want to be able to use a drop-down box to select the supplier from our list. So I'm going to insert a drop-down box. So we're going to go to data, and we're going to go to data validation, and we're going to select a list. And our source is going to be our supplier list, and we kind of want it from there, and let's just take it down. I'll show you later on how to do a source that actually picks up the numbers, but I'm just going to take it to, say, 10,000 for now. It's doubtful that you're going to have more than 10,000 suppliers. So that is then our first drop-down box, and you can see when we run it, it gives us an option A and B. And I'm going to just copy that down. I want those to be AB, and those to be AB, and this one I want AA. So, and we want the same thing in there. Now the other thing that we obviously want to be able to select an all as well. So I'm just going to insert. So I'm just going to create a copy of this AA, because I don't want to insert at the top, because otherwise it's going to be above where my list is using as a data source. So I'm rather doing a line below, duplicating AA, and then just changing this one to all. And now when I go to my sheet, I should see all as the first option and then AA and AB as my next options. And the same would happen here. You would see an all, but obviously on the ledger you would never use the all as your supplier. You're going to use one of the actual suppliers. So in theory you could create two lists, and I'm going to show you later on how we can modify or we can create a VBA subroutine that checks your ledger for any new names and then adds it onto your list. So to get the days, we're going to take the aging date and we're going to deduct the transaction date from it, and that's going to give you the amount of days since this transaction took place. Now the I1, we want to freeze that, so I'm going to click on it and press F4, because when if its position is frozen with the two dollar signs, one before the column and one before the row, then it is a fixed position. So it will always refer to I1. And now when we copy it down, it's going to reference I1, and only the second part of the formula will move down. You can see it moved from, there's H11 and there's H12 that's referring to, but the I1 is still exactly the same. Okay, now the 0 to 29, that is the first aging period, that is your current, and so you can see this is entered as a string, 0 to 29. It means that we have to break this up into two numbers, because we want to determine whether the days that is referred to in the line is greater than the first number and smaller than the second number. So the way we're going to do that is we are going to we're going to do a complex formula, but we're going to break it up into components, so I can show you how we get it put it together. So the first part is going to be the length of the entire string, and for that we're going to use equals the length of the string, and that gives us 4. Then to break this string up, we want to get the start position of the first number, and that is just going to be 1, and it's always going to be 1 because of the nature of what we're entering here. Then the first number that we want to extract out of there is therefore going to be the mid of this string, comma, and it's going to be this 1. So I'm not going to select the 1, I'm just going to type 1 because that there's no formula in there. And then we're going to do a find, because we want to find where the minus sits. And that's also going to be in the string, the same string, and we want to start at the first character, and we want to minus 1 from that. So we're going to close that and minus 1 from this position, and that's going to give us the 0 that is there. So in the case where, let's change this to 30 to 60 days, we're going to get a 5 is the length of the whole string, the start position is still 1, and the first number is going to be 30 based on the mid that we got. The 1 year is our first position, and the find, in other words the position of wherever the minus sits, is going to be our third position. But we don't want up to the third position, we only want up to the second position, the position before the minus. So that's why we're minusing the 1. Then to get our second number, we want to get the start position of the second number. Now the start position of the second number is going to be the find of the minus of the string, and starting at position 1, So from the first position, we want to count how many it is until we hit the minus, and that will give us 3. And then we are going to add a +1. Sorry, I typed this in the wrong column. And that will give us a 4. So the minus is sitting in position 3, and we want the position after the minus. That's going to be our start position. Then we need to get the length for the next mid function. We need the length of that string. So the way we're going to get the length is with this formula. So it's the length of B3, and the length of it is 5. And from that, we're going to minus the position of where we find the minus sign, which is 3. So 5 minus 3 is going to give you 2. So now you can see that we have the two numbers extracted, and that is the entire formula for the first number, and this one is the entire formula for the second number. So now we want to combine those two. But you can see, if you look at both of these numbers are left justified. It's telling you that this is not a number. It is actually still a string, and the mid function would normally extract a string from a string. So we need to convert this into a number, because otherwise our formula is not going to work. If it's trying to find a string in these, it's going to compare a string to a number value, and you're going to see that if we try and use that as is, it will cause an error. It will actually always show you nothing, because it won't find a match. So in order to convert it to a number, because it is a small number and it doesn't have doesn't have any fractions, we can use the int keyword to make it an integer. So an integer, if your number was longer, let's say you are talking about numbers in the millions, then you would probably rather want to convert it to a long. And if you had fractions in it, and it wasn't for aging that you were using it, it was something else, and you want to look up using a number with a fraction, then you would have to convert it to a double. So we're going to do the same with this one. It is now also an integer. So now it is in a state where we can actually use these numbers, and we no longer need these portions which I showed, which was basically just to show you how I get to this number. So now we have two formulas which we're going to be combining. So the way we're going to combine them is with an if statement. And we're actually going to embed two if statements within each other. So we can take an if statement, and we want to compare this number and the logical test that we are doing is we want to see if this number is greater than the first number. Okay, so for now let's just type a 0 in there, and then if it is true, we want to return this value. If it is false, we want to return a 0. Okay, so now we have a value. It's obviously it is greater than 0, so it is going to hold true. But we don't want to just compare one number. We want to compare two numbers. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this formula and we're going to copy it. And here where you've got the true function, because remember you want to check whether both of these conditions are true, whether it is greater than the first number here and smaller than the second number. So both conditions will be true. So in this section where there's true, we're going to put the formula a second time. So we're replacing what was between those two commas with a second if statement. Now our first if statement will be checking whether the first number is true. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this formula that we've got here without the equals, and we're going to replace this 0, because we want to check whether it is greater than the first number. So we're replacing our 0 with that. Then our second formula that's in here without the equals, we want to go and check whether the second value is smaller than it. But we don't want to just check whether they are, this case is greater. We also want to check if it is equals. And the same with the second formula. We also want to check whether the second part of the if statement is smaller or equals. Because if you have 0 to 29 in here, you want to be able to see whether the value is equals to 29 as well, not just smaller than 29. And it must be greater than 0 or equals to 0 to be included in this part of the aging. And there we have our formula. So you can see the reason why I broke it up into little components and then stitched them all together. Because the formula is quite hectic, and it's also the reason why I'm going to show you a Visual Basic alternative, because this can be quite hectic and you could make a mistake somewhere in this formula, and then it is a lot to go and check through all the formulas. You would probably only have to check the first formula of each and then be able to copy it down, but ultimately this is not what you want. Now, if we had to copy this formula down, you will see that the B3 is not an absolute position. So we want it in absolute position because we don't want it to copy the formula down. I'm going to show you what happens if I do copy it down. So if I copy it there, I get a value error because now it's trying to compare whether this number is greater than or smaller than 2000. But it's also has our little mid function that's breaking things up. So, and is not finding a minus in this. So immediately, by the time it gets to the minus, before it actually starts doing the comparison, your formula is already falling flat. So what we want to do is you press F2, and each one of these B3s, we're going to make an absolute position by pressing F4 on it. And that sets them all to an absolute position. And now we can copy this formula down, and it will show you whether each of these days fall between 0 and 29. So you can see 1, it holds true there, it holds true there, it holds true there, but in these positions with 31 it's just more than 29, so it's not true. And now we can do the same, we can copy the same format across. So I'm going to take this formula, so I press F2 and then I select everything and copy it, because then it doesn't move my variables up. I want it to refer to the same cells. The only cell that I don't want it to refer to is this cell here. So each of these formulas I'm just going to drag across. Whoops, I didn't do all of them. So there's another one, and another one, and another one. And they all now refer to this. But you can see it's throwing out a value error because I don't have anything in here. So now I'm going to say if that is between 30 and 59, and I can copy my formula down, and you can see it works. 31 falls in the next aging period. And I'm going to do the same for each one of the aging periods that I want to determine. So 60 to 89 days will fall in my third aging period. So again, I would just select the formula, go into the formula and copy it from there, and the values. So you can see that the reason why I go into the actual formula and copy the formulas, in other words, press F2, is because if I copy it, all my links to my different values that I want to use in the formula stays the same. So it allows me to just modify the ones that I do want to change, which in this case is this one here. Whoops, one missing. Okay, and there, that one is as well, and I can copy it down. So I'm going to continue doing this for each one of the periods that I want to do. So this is from 90 days to 119 days. Same thing, F2, copy, paste it, and just modify the one formula or the one value that I want to change. Okay, so and then my last period is 120 days, and it is beyond 120 days, so it can be any amount of days. So for the purpose of this, I'm just going to put quadruple 9 in, because I doubt that one's going to allow aging to get to that point, but it just gives it the capability to handle something of that falls within that period. So I'm just going to move that across, and there is my formula for any other days. Now we are at a point where we can actually link it to our I'm just going to remove this, and now we can link it to our aging. So current will be just purely the sum of anything that falls in this. So I'm going to select the entire column, because the 0 to 29 is a string, it's not going to add into the numbers. I'm going to do a sum of column C, a sum of column D, sum of column E, and a sum of column F. And we get to 620, we can do a cross check. We have 670, so something did not go right. Okay, so what didn't go right is this was, remember I copied this from another sheet, so it was not a formula, so we're just going to sum it up. So that's 670, and this gives you 670. We are in match. And that is basically how I would be doing the aging using this method. So I would probably just color this in a different, normally I use pink for anything that I'm going to be hiding, which is my formulas that's on the side. That just kind of helper formulas. And now for the aging, we also want to be able to determine if it's a specific supplier, because at the moment this formula only accounts for all of the transactions. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to use an if statement. So let's do a sum if. Okay, so just I'm going to change the color of this because it is blue on blue when I type the formula, so you can't really see it. So I'm just going to make it a different color so you can see the aging a little bit clearer. Okay, so let's do the sum if. So we're going to sum if, and we're going to select the supplier name, and the supplier must be a match with the supplier that we selected here, and the sum range is going to be whatever our aging period is. Now we have all in there, so you're going to see that it comes up with 0. So we want to again do an if statement in here, because if it is all of them, then we want it to follow, just sum the entire column. If it is not, if it is specific supplier, then we want it to sum according to the supplier. So we're going to do an if statement. So if this equals all, then we want it to just sum B. If it is not, then we want it to do a sum if. So now you can see, just for that one field, if I toggle and I just look at AA, for instance, 270, we can just double check AA to make sure that it is a match, and yes, it is 270, so that is correct. So now this formula we can also reuse. So wherever we've got B, we're just going to have a C in both those columns. The rest of the formula stays the same. And then we're going to do the same for column D. And column D here. And we're going to do the same for column E. and column E here, and finally for column F. So for AA we still have the 270, which is a match with the different periods for AA. And if we select AB, we can check that as well. AB, and these are AB, that's 1600, and our value here is 400. So there's an issue. Let's see, did I pick up all the ABs? No, I didn't. So that is correct. And then for all transactions, we get back to the 670. So we are totally in match, and this now allows us to have a look at the aging of any one of our suppliers. So this is method one, where you have a lot of fields in here, and you know, the formulas are quite extensive, especially in this section. So we're going to see if we can make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to show you a function in Visual Basic whereby we can eliminate the days column, and then I'm going to show you a function whereby we're going to eliminate all of these columns and only show 0 to 29 or 30 to 59 in a single column, which can also then be used as a SUMIF method. So before we proceed, you just need to make sure that on your Excel you have the developer tab available to you. If you don't have it available, what you need to do is go to File, Options, Customize Ribbon, and click Developer On. Once you've clicked it on, you can just click OK, and then you should have the developer tab available to you. When you click on Developer, you're going to see one option there, Visual Basic, and when you click on that, you will be presented with a screen that looks like this. Just removing this, it was something I did before. Okay, so now we're going to, you can right click on your Excel spreadsheet, just make sure that you are in the right book. My book hasn't been given a name yet since I've started showing you this, so mine is called Book 1. Just right click on it and say Insert Module, and now you have a module that is open to you. So in this module we're going to start creating the function. So we want it to be a public function. Now to explain functions to you, when you type in Excel equals sum, that is a function, and everything that follows on it is the variables that you are passing to that function. So it may be cell numbers, or it may be a number that you type in, or it may be a string that you type in, but they're all variables that gets passed to your function, and that is based on those variables that your program decides what the outcome is going to be that it's going to put in that cell. So we're basically creating a function like that. So our function is going to be called, let's call it aging method 1. Now there is limitations to what you can put in this name. There's certain special characters that you cannot put in. You can put an underscore in it, but you know, things like dollars and things like that is going to cause havoc if you put it in your function name. So then we open the brackets, and now if I didn't open brackets, if I just press enter, it's going to create an int function and it's going to create 2 double brackets. This means I'm passing no variables to this function. In other words, whatever I give it inside the function, that's the only thing it has to work with. But we want to give it some variables. We want to give it a couple of variables. The one is we want to give it maybe a transaction date. And our transaction date we're going to dimension as a string. Sorry, this is going to be a date. Then we also want to give it the aging date. And that is, I'm just going to make the screen a little bit smaller so I can show you on the spreadsheet as we code what it is that I'm referring to. So the aging date is going to be this date at the top. So it's the date that you want to use to do your aging with. And then we are going to give it a couple of we're going to give it a couple of variables, one of them being the transaction amount, because when you enter this formula, what you want it to return in this column is the actual transaction amount, like we did here. What we are going to eliminate out of this, and I'm going to delete it now, and you'll see that errors are going to appear all over the screen. But what we're trying to do with this function is we're trying to eliminate this massive formula that we have at the moment. So we literally want to put equals aging method 1, and we want to open the bracket and put 4 variables, being the date, the transaction date, the aging that we are referring to, and the amount. And by selecting those, it should kick out an amount here without having to put all of this information that we've got here at the moment. So we know what our formula should look like. And I think the order that we should do it in is probably, we're going to probably do it in the format of aging method 1. Then we want to put this value in. We want to put the aging date in. We want to put the date, the transaction date in, and then we want to put the amount in. And what we wanted to, now it's going, there is no such method, so we've created the method, the function, but we have nothing in that function, so it's not going to, it's going to come back to this, and you can see I put a comma in, but I didn't complete it, so it cannot even complete that because I need to complete what I've been typing here. So, but we know now what the order is that we want it in, so we want the aging as a string. We want the aging date next, so I'm going to put that second as a date. Then we want the transaction date as a date, and then we want the transaction amount. And that we're going to make a double, because a double would allow us to put fractions in. If you put an integer in, you're not going to be able to use very big numbers, and you will not be able to use. So an integer is fine if we were dealing with this, but as individual numbers. At the moment, it's a string, and we're going to have to break it down to 2 integers. So that's what we are going to put in. We're quite happy with that. So now if you refresh this, you're going to get 0 because there's nothing in our function. The function works, the function is there, and it recognizes it, but it doesn't know what to do with it yet. Now, in the case of, if you do a sum, and the moment you open the bracket, you get little digits that shows you what you need to populate in that. With your own custom functions, you don't get that. So what you need to do is, we are going to use aging method 1, being this one here, if you press at this point Control, Shift and A, it is going to actually show you what you need to put in those different areas in your formula. Now, at the moment, that throws a value error because we've got strings and all kinds of things, and all of these at the moment is just the names. So we're going to get to that now. Let's first create the function, and then we can continue from there. So the first thing we want to collect is we want to collect the aging date, or that we were already collecting it in the function. So now we want to do something with it. So we want to use that aging date, and we want to deduct from it the transaction date. And we're going to call this, we're going to give this a name. that is the aging, let's call it aging days, because that's what it's going to kick out. So at this point we have a function that can do something. Now in order to pass it back to your program, because you'll see if we press F2 and we press enter, we're still getting 0 because nothing's being passed back to the program. So in order to pass it back to the program, we could have just put this in here. So now if we run the program, we F2 and press enter, we're getting the difference between the two dates, and that is what it is passing now. But that's not what we want. We wanted to do more than just that. So the next step is we're going to go back to what we had there, aging days. And these aging days, that's fine. We now have the aging days, but we want to do a comparison with those aging days. So we also want to be able to break this number up, the 0 to 29, into the 2 like we did in our initial in our Excel formula. So the way we're going to do that, just get back to my developer, is we need to take that, we need to collect this string, and that string is coming in via this aging parameter. So what are we going to do with aging? We want to break it up into the first part of the aging. So let's just call it aging A. And we don't want to pass the whole, this is going to just pass the entire number to it, but that's not what we want to do. We want to grab the first portion of it. So before we get to that, let's first determine where the minus sits in this, in that aging, that value that's being passed to us. So we're going to get it to say, so we're going to call it aging separator equals, and we're going to use a function that is not native to VBA, it's actually native to Excel. So we're going to call it via the worksheet function formula, and then we put dot, and we can use the same function name as what we had in Excel, which is find. And now we're going to pass the minus to it. And we not from VBA you can't directly pass the cell number to it. So what we are going to pass to it is the name that we have here, aging. So we're going to find the minus in aging, and also we're going to start at the first character of that. Now we can test whether that actually works by doing this. We're going to say aging one method equals aging separator. And now if we go to our Excel sheet and we get 2. So it is working. It's telling us that the minus in our Excel spreadsheet is the second character in that. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little dash a quote in front of it that makes it a quote, so it's not part of the program. So if we run it again, you're going to see that nothing happens again. So now we know where the aging separator is. So now the aging A that we wanted, what we want is we want the mid function, and we're going to use aging as our input, and the start position is going to be 1, and this aging separator that throws out 2 tells us where it needs to end. So we're going to put the aging separator in there, but remember that's going to give us 2, so now it's going to give us 2 characters, and we only want anything that's before the minus. So we're going to say -1. And again, we can test it. We're going to just set aging A equals to the aging method, and when you run it, you get the O. So we now have the first part of this date. So we know where the aging separator is, so we can again use it for aging B, which is the second part of our aging. So we're going to use the same formula, we're going to use the same input, which is aging, but now we're going to start in a different position. We're going to start with the aging separator, which is 2, so it's going to start from 2, but we want 2 plus 1. So we want the aging separator plus 1. And the next part is we want it to return the length of this minus wherever the position is of the minus in that string. So the second part of it is now the length of aging. Okay, and then we want to minus from that the length, the aging separator. So the length of it is 1, 2, 3, 4 minus the 2 is going to give us 3. So it's going to return 3 characters, which means, let's test it, because what I'm expecting is that the minus is going to be included. So let's take aging B and we set it equals to our function name, and now we get 29. So just want to see, not what I expected. So let me just double check my formula. It's length of aging, which is 4. Okay, no, that's right. 4 minus 2 gives you 2. So it's only going to return 2 characters from the position after the minus. So that is correct. So now we have those 2 components. We now have the breakdown of our aging. But you can see that value is a string, and so we need to convert aging A and aging B to an integer. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use the same name, so aging A, and we're going to do one for aging B. So aging A we're going to set equals to itself, but we want it as an integer. And aging B we're going to set equals to itself as an integer. And let's run this again with the 29, and you're going to see that it is now a number. So it's returning a number. You can see, although it gives you a 0.00, it's just because of the formatting that we've got there, because an integer cannot return any value after the point. So even if this was 29.2, if we convert it to an integer, it will only be 29. It cannot be a fraction of a number. So now we have those 2 values. And we can actually now do a comparison between our aging date, or the aging in days, and those 2 numbers. So we're going to insert that here. So we're going to do if statement. If aging in days is less than aging A, and aging in days is greater than, and we remember we wanted equals as well, so it's smaller or equals to, and greater or equals to aging B. So if it is true, if it complies with both of those requirements, then we want the function, the function that we've got here to be equals to our transaction amount. Else, we want aging method to be equals to 0. So if it doesn't fall in that criteria, then it must set it to 0. And we can take this out because that's, remember, we just tested with that. So there is a function now that we have where we take the aging, we break it up into its two components. We compare to the aging date minus the transaction date. So aging in days. And then once we've compared it, we decide whether it's going to kick out the amount or it's going to kick out 0. So here we have a complete function. We can test it. And you can see that it is returning a 0. So let's see, it should have returned the transaction amount. So let's just see why we are getting a 0. Okay, so first of all, this is totally skew. I didn't use the values that was right next to it. Okay, so I swapped these two things around because aging in days is not less than aging A. It should be the other way around. So we want to compare age A to aging days and age B to aging in days. And now we get our 2000. Okay, so now the only thing that we need to check is we need to make sure that it has the correct values in it. And then you can see this position here and this position here, they need to be absolute positions, because if we copy this formula down, we always want to refer to that specific position and this specific date. So if we leave it like this and we copy it down, we're going to get a value error because it's trying to use ledger as the date and it's trying to use 2000 as our aging period, which is not correct. So we just basically need to go and that needs to be absolute, so F4 on it, and the 29 needs to be absolute. Oops, not the 29, undo that one. It's the B3 that needs to be an absolute value or an absolute link. Now, after copying it down, you notice that all of them are coming up with 0 to 29 days, which we know isn't true. So this gives us the ideal opportunity for me to show you how to trace the error. So the first thing you're going to do is, in your code, and let's select in the margin here, you're going to click there. And this basically creates a breakpoint there. So if I go to my formula and I press F2 and I press enter, you will see that it highlights this code in yellow. It means that the code is run up to that point and it hasn't gone any further. And you can see, if you hover over it, you can see the values that's stored inside those things. Now by pressing F8, you can step through the program. So the moment you pressed F8 and it passed this, it shows that aging in days or aging days shows 5. The aging separator shows 2 when you step past that line, and you can hover over any of these things. It shows you what the value is that's currently stored in it. So aging, this works fine. It's picking up 0 as the aging, and aging B is picking up 29. Aging A becomes an integer, and that shows now a 0. You can see that one shows 0, this one shows 29, and the moment we've now converted this one to a 0, and you can see the difference between that with quotes and this without quotes. It means this is a number, and then this one becomes one with a number as well. So that's the same integer, the same variable, so it's changed both of those. And now it is looking at the next. So I press F9 and you can see what it's doing is it's taking aging A which is 0, and we know our aging that we have here, our aging in days should be 5, but this one which we're comparing it to says empty. And you notice what the problem is? We didn't use the same name, aging in days, and this one aging days. So it's comparing 0 to 0 or 0 to nothing, and that is why it's populating each one of these fields. So we need to take this name and replace this name and this name with it. Now it will reset because we made a massive change somewhere in the code, so it wants to rerun this code. So we can step through it again, and when we get to this line, you see, and remember, you just press F8 to step. Now when we get here, it shows 0 and is comparing it to 5. It's doing the right thing, and it's going to keep on running through. So now I can switch this off because I no longer need it, and I can just press the run button, and you see that it's fixed our issue. Now what happened here won't happen if you declare your variables explicitly. So it's always very important to do that, because if you're in a big program, you might not pick up that problem. So the way you do that is you say option explicit, and each one of the variables, but not the variables that you are passing to this function. Each of the variables that you're actually creating inside here, like aging separator, didn't come from this. It was something that we created inside our program. Okay, so the moment we run this, it says variable not defined. So we know that our issue is that this is not declared. So let's declare it and run through the code again. And it's found another variable that we are declaring inside here, but that we have not, that doesn't come from our function, and that's aging days. Because remember, aging days is something we created from aging date and transaction date. So we want to declare that as well. And aging days is a number, so and it's a small number, so we're also going to declare that as an integer. And then finally, we're going to create the aging A and aging B as variants. Why variant? Because remember, in this section, we pick it up as a string, and then we just use the same variable, but we convert it into an integer. So we're going to keep it as a variant type, and that should be everything that is needed for this to get this function rolling. Now for this video, we're already on almost an hour, so I'm going to do the next method that we can use, which is going to even shorten this a lot more. I'm going to do that as a separate video. So if you like my videos, please like and subscribe, and you are welcome to visit my website bringmesome.co.za, where you can download all the code and make use of it. My code is open to use, modify, and even if you decide to use in some program where you have commercial benefit from, you are welcome to use my code as a basis. I'm trying to help more programmers and people who are just generally interested in using Excel more efficient to learn more about Excel. And you know, the more people who enter the market and work on Excel, the longer the life of Excel and VBA will be. So please feel free to use my code in any way you wish. Thank you very much, and have a lovely day.